Good evening and welcome to all families who are joining us for the first time tonight, and welcome back to those families who joined us last week. The Parenting Center at Children's Hospital New Orleans presents Conversations About Race. Our topic today is how race impacts communities. Last week we discussed the history of race. We are joined by two spectacular presenters, Barbara Major and Diana Dunn of the People's Institute. I'll be your moderator this evening. I'm Patrice Wright, the Administrative Manager at the Parenting Center, a Department of Children's Hospital dedicated to helping parents and grandparents deal with the ordinary challenges of raising children. We offer classes, advice by phone, and resources to parents of toddlers to teens. We also provide support to schools within the community. Remember, it's a three-part series, and we will be back again next Wednesday for our final session. To fully benefit from these sessions, we ask that you attend all and remain until the end. We are hopeful the information gleaned from these sessions will help you facilitate conversations about race with your child or children. At the end of the series, a list of resources, such as suggested book readings for parents and children, will be sent to you via email. Please be advised that this series will be recorded. However, comments from the chat box will not be shared, only the audio. I'll re-enter the webinar in approximately 1 hour to read through any questions that arise in our chat box. You can find the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit questions throughout today's presentation. We will try to answer as many as possible. If your question is not answered during this webinar, we will email you after this session. We also encourage you to use the chat box to share any thoughts or feelings, comments, or anything that you feel you'd like to share as a result of something mentioned by the presenters. I would now like to turn it over to Ms. Barbara.
Thank you, Patrice. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. To those who were here with us last week, and welcome to those who this is your first time and hopefully not your last time. And I still struggle with I can't see your faces, but I get over it and I move on. Y'all can see mine. One of the things that I'm going to do first is just kind of tell you a little bit about who I am. Folk were here last week and I did introduction, and my colleague Diana will introduce herself. Then I'll quickly set a framework for these discussions, and Diana will do a quick update for folk who weren't here last week in terms of what we talked about very briefly, and then we want to look at the impact of race on communities. These conversations are what we will call foundational building blocks to really go take a deeper dive into understanding the whole concept of race and racism eventually. We're not talking about racism, but you can't talk about race and not talk about racism. But you can't go into the depths of dealing with racism in these short sessions. But what we can do is get people prepared a little bit to be able to take that long haul to really grapple with structural and institutional racism. Well, like I said, my name is Barbara Major. I'm an anti-racist community organizer. I'm also a trainer and facilitator. I work with a group here in New Orleans, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, but I work with other groups around the country as well who have an analysis of racism. I only work with organizations that have an analysis of racism that include systemic power. A lot of the folk who do this work basically dealing with diversity and inclusiveness, and all that's great, but we go deeper because we go like racism is the foundation for biases, you know what I'm saying? So you can be diverse, but the outcomes of your organization or your institution will be the same. I've been doing this work for 40 years with the Institute, but like I said, I work with other groups as well. I'm not an employee of the Institute. I'm actually retired, but myself, apparently nobody else in this world understands that. So I do a lot of this stuff all over, because today I was with a bunch of groups in Grand Rapids. Diana was with folk in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So we work with various groups. I've also done this work internationally in terms of not saying this is how you got to do it. I go mostly to learn from my cohorts around the world who are struggling as well against whether it's racism or fascism or xenophobia, whatever. It's like we connect because the struggle to recognize the humanity of every human being is happening all over this globe. We do our work primarily here in the United States. Um, Here locally, I'm known as an activist, and I've seen they've really dirtied that word. I've seen a lot. Most folks just acting up. An activist really is a community organizer who knows the difference between mobilizing and organizing. I've been the director of the St. Thomas Community Health Center. I was for many, many years before Katrina. Um, I've worked on various issues in the city. I chair one of the charter school boards, Robert Russell Moulton. I work with a collaborative group that's working around the issue of equity in the city of New Orleans, equity and economic development and contracting opportunities and access. I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, and those are, I guess, the best things for me, a mother. And I got a dog too. I don't know. So it's like, is that Popeye, Diana? That was Popeye. Yeah, Diana. So if folk got dogs it's okay with us. You know what I'm saying? So it's like just mute it and bring it back. But that's who makes us who we are. That's a little bit about who I am, and I'd like for my colleague to introduce herself, and then we'll set a framework for our discussion tonight. You're on mute,
Thank you,
Dee.
Barbara. Yeah, had to mute those dogs. Um, thank you. I want to first congratulate all of you for caring enough about your children to spend this time with us, and actually caring enough about yourself to be doing it, because you see the future, and the importance of understanding race, because so often we talk to our kids and have no clue about what is race and how that affects the world that we live in. Just so you know, I'm the mother of two biological children. One is black and one is white. And what I always like to say is they started in me the same way. They lived the same 9 months in me, and they came out of me the same way. But I've seen every institution treat my two children differently. So I know how important it is to talk to your children. I'm the grandmother of two white children and the great grandmother of two white and two black children. And each generation that we teach this information to has to be centered in what's happening in the world at that time. So how I talk to my children is a little different than I talk to my grandchildren, and will be, and my great grandchildren are too young to really talk about it, but they do have questions. And I've been, well, Barbara, I've been mobilizing for 15 years before I started learning what organizing and racism was, which I've been doing with Barbara for 40 years. So my work is really grounded in understanding community and understanding the impact we have as white people, since I'm a white person. Um, I've lived in New Orleans for 36 years, and I can't tell you, Barbara and I've traveled all over the world doing this work. But when we are able to do it at home, it just impacts us so much more. It's where our heart is at home. So thank you. I helped start the Fair Housing Action Center here in New Orleans, and I was board president for 10 years and actually was interim director for a while. So this is my passion, is doing this work with you and helping you in your journey with your children. And because of you and you having the interest in this and coming to this, then I have hope. And
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say is knowing history is critical when you talk to your children. You can't give them the history maybe that we give you, but knowing that history is critical. So read up on history, read up on the true history of the United States. So I just have to say it, Barbara. I was in the airport when the verdict came down yesterday, and I'm sitting there with my mask on, tears rolling out of my eyes, feeling like a fool because they turned off all the TVs. You know, a lot of times when things like that happen, they
Oh
turn
yeah.
the TVs off. So not everybody knew it, and I knew it soon, you know. So welcome everybody. We know we have a lot of work to do, don't we? Thanks, Barbara.
No problem, Didi. One of the I just want to quickly set a framework. And there were two questions from last week that we don't want to neglect. We'll get to them as we move into the impact of race on community. We're first, I got to thank the parenting center. Look, I'm from New Orleans, born in New Orleans. And you know how few organizations even have the courage to have this conversation? They're running scared. It's like, nah, we got to figure out how to talk to each other about this stuff and its impact, because we can't pretend it's not happening. In New Orleans, we'd rather just, like, well, let's just sit together and love each other and, sing some songs and all that's good. God knows I promote that. However, that is not going to change the outcomes of systems in this city. There will still be racial disparities in healthcare, in this education system, in housing. We've got to do more than that. And so hopefully at the end of these sessions, many of you will be encouraged to go through a whole 2.5-day process or 2-day process to really understand how deep and structural this is. And even then, you won't get it all. There's no way. This stuff has been around for 400 years, y'all. So we won't cover it all in 3 Wednesday sessions, and we can't cover it all in 2-day sessions as well. But what we can do is, I guess, make it more palatable for people to have a conversation, to create an environment where people feel safe and not attacked. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't care how safe you can make it. Some folk, when they hear the truth, they feel attacked. So, I can't help that. I'm just gonna say it like it is. But 99% of folk, when they hear the truth about this stuff, they don't feel attacked. They go like, now I get it. Because it's not about blaming or pointing fingers at each other. Last week, and I hopefully, like I said, you all these foundational pieces that we're giving, because we gave one last week looking at race. Today we want to look at its impact on community and why communities kind of look like they look, because we've been socialized to believe that these communities just pop up and look like they look. No, there's some history to this. And next week, we're going to talk more about how race impacts us individually and our relationships with each other. How do we build authentic relationships with each other? But I want to respond, Diana, to the 2 questions we had last week, because there's no way we're going to always finish before we get into, no, you want to bring us up to date so that everybody kind of know
Yeah.
where we were, and then we'll respond to the 2 questions. Thank you.
And Barbara, when you talk about people might feel attacked, I always start off with a quote that says, "I am responsible for the house in which I live, but did not build. None of us in
Yep.
this room built that house, but we have some responsibility for changing it so it's equitable to all." So we talked about the history of race. So just a little bit about it. I think most of us would agree that race is one of the biggest determinants in our outcomes in life. Is that, well, I can't say is that true, but shake your head. Yes. So whether you came to this country voluntarily or whether you were kidnapped, how your ancestors were treated, were you paid for your work, or were you forced to work to free labor, as in enslavement of Africans? Were your rights respected? Were the institutions set up for you, or were you banned from those institutions? Race has to do with wealth accumulation, graduation rates, where you live. Were you treated fairly by the health system, by police, by schools, by the job market, etc.? So race is a huge factor in our life, and I know we all know that. But when we ask people what is race, there's no clarity about it, and we understand why there's no clarity about it. So a lot of people will say, well, it's a social construct. Well, it is, but what's that based on? It's like just saying it's a social construct, it's not going to tell us what it's based on, or what your parents said it was. Well, did they tell you why it was that way? Or then the major answers are, the first answer is the color of your skin, and that is mostly what people say that race is. But it's not just the color of your skin, it's also other features that we look at to help determine what your race is. And that is a phenotypic expression of your DNA. But when the Genome Project looked at DNA, they found that we were 99.98% identical. No geneticist in this world can determine your race by looking at your DNA. It's impossible. And even if we look at the full skeletal remains, you can only be sure of the race 40 to 60% of the time. Other people say ethnicity and ancestry. Well, you could have the same ethnicity and ancestry, come to the United States, and you would be different races. Or culture, people will say. You could have the same language and religion, come to this culture and be different races. So we had to give a definition of it. And the main thing about the definition of race is why they had to develop race. So I think you'll get a little clue from the definition. Race is a specious classification of humans created by Europeans or whites to assign human worth and social status, using himself or white as the model of humanity and the height of human achievement for the purposes of establishing and maintaining privilege and power for those who would become white. So that was the reason Europeans wanted to prove that their society, their religion, everything was superior to everyone else's. That's why it was developed. So we looked at 4 of the original races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Australoids, and Negroid. And what we found out from it by really looking at why they were called Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Australoids, and Negroids is we found that we were creating a hierarchy of humanity. And that hierarchy, even to this day, is still the same, where white is on the top and the bookend to hold that up is black is on the bottom. Every other race can move up and down that, but closer to black, closer to white, maybe become white at some point. Not all of us that are white became white at the same time. Jewish people, Italians, Irish people, many people, it took them a long time to get white. I'm of German and Welsh and English heritage, so I became white probably in 1750 when I moved here, or my family did. I didn't. I'm not quite that old. Okay. And so this was it was set up to create a hierarchy of humanity, and that still is in place today if we look at the outcomes of our institutions. So that's what we're saying. And the reason you move up and down the line is whatever's economically or politically expedient to keep white people on top. That is the point of race, is to keep white people on top. All of us that are white didn't get there at the same time, but I want you to understand this has been a legal system in the United States. It has been upheld by the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Now, I'll just give a couple of days. I'll just say 1690 was the first time in the colonies that we used white. It was said Caucasian or white. It was white. And it said, no,
white.
right, no other Englishman or white man may intermarry with a Negro or an Indian. Why? Well, you don't want to mess up the white race by marrying somebody else. So they made it illegal for us to marry each other. And it wasn't until 1790, 100 years later, that the classification we talked about came into being. But we had been using it all that time. Is that good, Barbara? Is that,
that's good. And because we know that there's so much more to this.
Yeah.
But what we talk about is that race is really an illusion, but racism isn't. And this illusion has been institutionalized in this country, that we live under the myth of race. I want to talk a little bit tonight, and when you have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Diane.
I forgot to say one thing. I want to tell you that race was developed by anthropologists. So I just want to read to you, because this really puts the head on the pin, or whatever you say. So Johann Blumenbach was one of the ones that created it. And he said, not only did Blumenbach make clear the essential unity of humankind, but he also clearly recognized and unequivocally stated the fact that all so-called classifications of so-called varieties of mankind are arbitrary. That's why you can't say what is race, because it's arbitrary. Depends on what year it is, right? But then he goes on to say, still, and this is a quote, it will be serviceable to the memory to have constituted certain classes into which the men of the planet may be divided. And they were clear, the anthropologists were clear, it would be serviceable to white people to get this in place. Barbara, I just wanted to say that
I know that's
their words.
And like I said, there's so much more to this. I just want to make sure that we just setting a foundation, because folk who were here last week kind of heard some of this, but for folk who are here for the first time, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try and get to them. Patrice has it set up. If we don't get to your questions tonight, we'll try and respond to them afterwards before the series is over. I just want to quickly look at communities, the impact of this ideology, this concept of race on communities, and how it keeps us separated from each other. One of the things that a lot of people, when we talk about race, we talk about racism. First of all, it would, like I said, it take time for us to really get on the same page with what that is. We went through a brief process last week of just looking at race, but we want to look at communities. How are communities suffering from this stuff? How are they surviving with this concept of race? So I just want to look at the issue of power, because most people want to talk about race and racism, multiculturalism, diversity, but they don't deal with the issue of power. They don't deal with the issue of systemic and institutional power. You can't have a real conversation about moving forward as a community, an organization, or a country if we don't look at the issue of power. So I'm going to quickly do a power analysis. Now, when we're in the session, you would give me a whole bunch of feedback just in terms of time. You can give some, but I'm gonna go ahead and kind of lay it out just minimally. There's no way I can do the whole piece for you, but just want to just basics of community. And one of the things that we've come to understand is that when you do power analysis, that's basically assessing power. Who has it? Where is it? How is it engaged in community? We're talking about power analysis of community. So we don't call it power analysis. Diana and I are facilitators, trainers, consultants, whatever, but our core is that we're community organizers. So when we're in communities, we help communities do a power analysis. It's like an assessment of what's kicking their butts, and we call it a foot identification, because the community basically gave us that name. We can go as, like, whether we are anthropologists or sociologists or whatever, and we have a language power analysis. Well, the peoples they didn't say a power analysis. They said, we getting our butt kicked. Miss B, we getting our butt kicked. Miss Diana, we getting our butt kicked. So we, along with the Institute and our mentors, we identified as a foot identification. Folk need to know what's kicking their butts. Because sometimes when you under all that pressure, you can't tell. You feeling some stuff as a young, you feeling some kind of way, but you can't name all that feeling and where it's coming from. So I want to briefly describe, and somebody please put in the chat, y'all gonna help me do this. When we talk about communities that are struggling, what are some of the names that we give these communities, struggling communities? Just type it in right quick, struggling communities. I'll throw one out there. We call them at risk. Give me another one. The hood, absolutely. Thank you. Give me another one. Somebody give me another name of these communities. What do we call them? The ghetto, absolutely. And here in this country, we think of the ghetto, we think of the Black community, but that word goes back to Europe in terms of folk of Jewish descent and what happened to them with the ghetto, the slums, absolutely. Then we got the target area, we got the empowerment zone, we got all these new names, but we're talking about the same thing, right? Disadvantaged, and now we have new names. We put projects, exactly. We got all these names. And if we talking about Latinx or Hispanic or Latino, we say barrio. When we talking about First Nation indigenous people, we say reservation, even though we know that most indigenous folk now live in more urban areas. Low income, exactly. We say minority community, which we need to help people understand minority is a dirty word. I may not have time to go through all of that, but the root word of minority is minor. You understand? And so we and even in this city, in New Orleans, we're a majority. Guess what? Don't mean much, because all they say, no, Black folks, you a majority minority. Like a jumbo shrimp. Like, nah, that carries weight. At risk, all these names put on children. Poor white people, usually they want to put all the poor white people in trailer parks in Appalachia. That ain't real either. Poor white people in this country basically live wherever they can afford to live. They are concentrated nowhere. They're everywhere. But when you come to people of color, now ain't they fault. It is what it is. But we're gonna talk about why it is as we move forward. Now, when you see these communities, there's certain things that you see. I'm gonna start it, and y'all start typing it in. When you get there, you know you in one of these communities. One thing you're gonna see some rundown housing. Now, let's be clear. There's wonderful stuff going on in these communities. Folk raising their children, sending them to these schools. I mean, doing the best that they can. We know there's good stuff going on in these communities, but I want us to look at these communities, all of it, in terms of what not only we see, but what other people see. We know there may be boarded up houses. What else do we see? They have parks, usually the park named after some great leader out of the community. Anybody from New Orleans? L. Davis Park, right? But the park ain't got nothing in it. Basketball goals ain't good, nothing working. We know what it is. Yeah, we see men loitering around. And now we see a lot of unsupervised children too. Fast food. Thank you, Jenny. Every fast food you got, we gonna see it there. We also see a lot of churches, and I ain't talking about chicken. We see a lot of churches. Drugs inside the community of folks selling drugs. We see some of them cars up on blocks. We see some of them cars with the mind your own business. When personal injury, Cat, thank you, personal injury attorneys. We also see for $150, I can find your baby daddy, DNA testing. Sand everywhere, no trees. Yeah, there's not always a lot of green space. And we know there's some difference when it's urban and rural. But when we start looking at these feet, we're gonna find out it's the same. Oh wow, General Dollar Store. In fact, you find every kind of dollar store. We got dollar stores up to yang yang in these communities. You don't find a grocery store, but you're gonna find a lot of dollar stores, right? There's maybe a Walmart somewhere, but dollar stores, so many. Graffiti, absolute. Liquor stores, liquor stores, pawn shops, rent to own, payday loans. And let me tell you what I've noticed. And that's, all the dialysis treatment places. And I know people need dialysis treatment, but I always have to ask the question, why are so many of these places in my community, and why is it that my people need so many of these places? Well, they didn't eat right. Well, why didn't they eat right? Could they not afford? Was there fresh food available? Were they able to buy the medicine early on? Yeah, it's like all these amigos. Yeah, I see it. Bus stops. Yeah, I love it. Oh, bars on the doors and windows. Yes. And we have schools. Now, one thing about New Orleans, we do have some beautiful schools because we got a lot of money to do these schools, right? 2 billion. President Barack Obama gave the state of Louisiana to rebuild schools. What the president didn't understand that when it went through the state of Louisiana, it was going to make sure that Black folk made no money off building these schools. These schools built on behalf, basically, that were destroyed. Black folk made less than 1% in the rebuilding of these schools, because when the money, there was nothing that said that you had to either hire contractors locally, who had to hire folk locally. So the state these are, and so what you find going, what do you think going down straight down the middle of these communities? What something in it, wherever I travel in this country, I see it. Somebody got interstate, I-10, straight, zoom, straight down the middle of these guys. And that's not just here, y'all. I don't care where I am around the country. Now, there's usually not a sign that say the ghetto or the hood, exit 6B, but almost on every interstate around this country, in every major city, there's a sign that lets you know who got it? Martin Luther King Boulevard, you got it. And then I want folk to notice you got Martin Luther King Boulevard here in New Orleans, and talk about the difference between power and position. We got Black folk in every kind of position, but I bet you Martin Luther King Boulevard don't cross St. Charles Avenue. Just gonna sit that right there and leave it. That's something we can talk about later, all right? When we look at this community, like I said, I'm gonna go fast because I want y'all to talk back, and we're gonna have time for questions. Now, when we look at this community, we know there's a lot of.
Can I add something? I got to add the factories and the pollution coming out of all the factories.
And many of these communities are built on brown fields. And those of you in New Orleans, go back there where the folk are still fighting to try to get out, because Moton School was going to be built. The initial one was built, not the first one, because it was built in the project in Desire. The second one was built on top of a waste dump. I grew up on Clewitt Street in the 9th Ward. All of that was landfill. All of that. You know why? World War II veterans, most of them who wanted to buy a house, when they came back from World War II, they couldn't use their GI Bill to buy a house in a neighborhood that was set. They couldn't use their GI Bill to integrate white neighborhoods. So they had special places for them. People, why y'all still in the night? What hell? That's the only place my daddy could go buy a house. Basically, in terms of using his GI Bill. No on ramps, but maybe a few exits. I hear you. Yes. Brown soil. And I'm trying to think of the name of what they call these communities. And we got folk here in New Orleans still struggling. I can't think of the name of it. Press Park. People are still fighting to get off that waste dump with all them carcinogens. Okay. So this stuff ain't nothing that happened way back when. Now, like I said, we can go through this, but I want to quickly look again at Superfund site. Thank you, Tania, and I hope I got it right. Or is it Tania? Tania. So when we look around, and I want you to draw, Diana, a red circle around this neighborhood for me. Thank you very much. And we know if we had time, we put a lot more in this community. There's so much going on. And like we say drugs in this community, but who sell more drugs in this community than we think about drug dealers? Who y'all think sell more drugs in these communities? Anybody take a wild guess? They usually cross the street from each other. Thank you, Tania. Shoot, Walgreens, CVS, we don't have Rite Aid by me no more. Because when you look at the over medication of folk in these communities, then I go like, they pushing more drugs, working in relationship to pharmaceutical company than the drug dealers. Okay, we focus on, them folk ain't up to no good, like we say, them knuckleheads. But we got folk in our community, y'all. And I'm not saying, do you not want the drugstore? And it's not about that. We need to understand in a much more comprehensive way what's happening to these communities. Diana drew a red circle around this community. What redlining? Anybody know what redlining is? Type it in quick. Why I'm gonna move on. If you know what redlining is, don't let me leave you without talking about it. But when I talk about, thank you, Todd. Redlining, and some people don't know what redlining is. Redlining is basically the federal government of these United States put banks had maps up on their walls, circled these communities and said, this is not where we're going to make loans. This is not where we're going to finance businesses. Redlining was supported by these United States. Redlining, voting, somebody said voting districts. Actually, that's called gerrymandering, where they draw lines to make sure that certain folk can't elect certain folk. Okay, it's like, no, we're going to make sure that your vote don't count. That's called gerrymandering. But the redlining, we still got redlining. We know, folk, your car insurance, your life insurance, your house insurance, your flood insurance, depending on your zip code. You got a red line around. And look, if you know anybody, you go tell them, they say, that's a lie. Look it up yourself. And tell them to go look it up. I tell folk, prove what I say ain't real. You know what I'm saying? But I want to talk about the feet, y'all. The feet, who's kicking the butts of folk in these communities. And I'm talking about systems and their institutions. I'm not talking about people that are part of these systems being bad systems. You know what I'm saying? Like, every cop ain't bad, but the policing in this country is horrifically awful. That's what we're talking about, the bigger picture, understanding this. So when we look at systems that folk got to deal with every day. Now, these same systems have been doors and windows of opportunity for us. So I'll put one up there, the education system. That doesn't mean it's not kicking the butt. It is a foot of oppression on communities like this. So give me another system. What else you think? I put education. Anybody type something in? I'm gonna put healthcare system, justice system. Somebody said criminal justice system. One of my young colleagues, young Latinx sister, she said, the young people call it the criminal sentencing system. But it's like this criminal justice system. Somebody said water, and water would actually come under like city services, which is like city government. Because, people looking at Flint, but the water issue is all over. I look at the water system here in New Orleans. What else? Other systems. How about the housing system, the unemployment system, the employment system, which covers unemployment. How about the real estate system, the use of land, who get it, the political system. Who can get along? Thank you, Todd, around their red line, and who can get along and who can't. Absolutely. What banking and lending. Thank you. I don't know who 7777083, but I like the way you think. Banking and lending institutions. Yes. Oh, the background check system. That is, Jules, that is so, that background check, you know what I'd add up into that too? That's part of that whole criminal justice system. But one of the things that irked me is people's credit disallows them to get a job or a place to stay so that they can build a correct it. That blew my mind, that if you got bad credit, you can't work here, you can't work. It's like, okay, we know that cut a lot of us out. And I got a few. And let me tell you, I'm gonna put the military system up there. I'm not talking about folk in the military bad. I'm talking about the militarization of communities of color in this country. I'm talking about the policing of particularly Black and brown bodies in this country. And it's all done under police law enforcement, but very much a part of the military. And it's interesting when you look at military recruiting facilities are usually located in these communities. And then you can see the disproportionality of folk who not only go in the military, but become the cannon fighters. I'm talking about first line, or people who are, we talking poor people. When I look at the disproportionality of African Americans who went, men particularly who went to Vietnam, the impact they had on my community. You took them out, you put guns and drugs in. There's so much of this history, and we will give you books to go to, not books that like say what we want to say. Like Howard Zinn's book to me is just the best. Just talk about Black folk, you talk about the true origin story of this nation. So when we look at these feet of oppression.
Social services, Barbara. Yeah.
Oh God, and New Orleans got a lot of them. Social service system. And they usually have their little office. They have a little center in the community, but the big house is usually downtown somewhere or in a whole nother state. When I look at Red Cross, and I ain't saying they bad. I'm just saying they don't know what they are. I look at, and there's so many more. The more time, the more people. Let me tell you, the tax system, even the way that we fund schools, who pays the most taxes in this country? And I put the drug system too, Diana, because and let me tell you, philanthropic organizations. We got foundations in this city and nationally who get to tell us what our priorities should be, that we should be addressing. Other than that, you don't get money from them. Okay, they get to define movement. Not saying they bad. Like I say, some of my best friends, but I look at in the government system at every level. That and for people, the whole ICE, that, let me tell you what it's done. Used to be Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS. Now it's Immigration and Custom Enforcement. The language is very, very powerful, y'all. As long as you are a minority, you considered a minority, you will be treated in a minor way. Racism.
Corporations too, when you think of all the.
Yes, corporations. Yeah. And I just want to, and we look at these, and let's just I just want to look at this a little bit. I'm not going to put any more up there because Patrice, you got to help me with my time, because there's some things I really want to make sure that we cover, and I want to make sure that folk have time to ask questions. Let's just take a couple of these systems, like Well, Barbara, like the education system, like I chair the board, I chair a charter school board. Now, I ain't telling you I believe in no charter school system, but that's another workshop. But I want to make it clear to folk understand that. But I always tell folk I got to play the hand I'm dealt. My babies are in those schools, then I got to engage those schools. But when I look at the education system as a foot of oppression, let's just throw out some things. And I'm not just talking about education, what I'm talking about education all the way, everything from people who go through an education system, go to college and come out with college loans, can't never get on their feet because they owe so much. I'm talking about the fact that teachers don't get paid well. I'm talking about the fact that there's still inequities in the education system when you have stuff that's called magnet schools where some children can get in and other children can't. And some schools are like vegetable bins where the kids really are not considered at all. I'm talking about the education system in terms of the curriculum, that we are mandated to teach a curriculum that may not have any relevance to the reality of the children that are in our care. Anything else with education system? Y'all know some stuff. We talking about the fact that ill-equipped folk are put in schools or have been put in schools, and I'll just keep it in New Orleans. We know that we've lost, if not 2 generations, 1 generation of children to this racked up. I'm cleaning up my language because I might have some children that can hear me. This racked up education system we got here in New Orleans, okay? And I'm not talking about one person. I'm not talking about, well, let's get a new superintendent, let's get a new school board. You could put Boo Boo the Clown there. If the system is dysfunctional, I don't care who's there, it's going to continue to be dysfunctional. So it's not just about replacing people, it's also about redoing a system. Yes, Diana.
15 minutes you have until 7 when questions start. You got plenty of time.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. So we look at an education system, the curriculum, the lies that we still teach about the history of this country, the exclusion of the history of all peoples of this country, that still exists. Let's move to, and if you got something in there, please put it in terms of education system.
Standardized test you wrote.
Oh my God, standardized tests. They still track children, the tracking of children. And we talk about the school to prison pipeline. That, to understand what that means, one is that we know the data shows that when children are struggling in school by 4th grade, when they've been labeled with as being whatever, what do they call it now? Not disability, when they've been labeled basically in special ed, that the likelihood of these children ending up in the prison system, because all they have to look at is look at who's in the prison industrial complex. That's another foot all by itself. The mass incarceration that going in this country, making a whole lot of folks so wealthy, y'all, so wealthy. Still, it is like enslavement, because in the Constitution of these United States, slavery is not illegal. If you're convicted of a crime, you become the slave of the state. Read the 13th.
I'm going to read you what some people said, just so you know, it's up here. Schools,
cool.
Schools are named for the oppressors, colonizers' stories, academically challenged, students with disability. And someone wrote the farm. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just.
Thank you, Diana, because I can't see all of the chat. The whole idea of the fact that communities really don't have control of what their children are learning or how their children are learning. That there is no real investment in schools. Let me tell you what, if this nation, if I could bring it to the state, cared about its children, then we would have an IEP for every child. Every child, we would draw on the strengths of every child in terms of what needs to be provided. But our children are not a priority. Country that doesn't see its children or its elders as a priority is a nation doomed to failure. I just write that somewhere on a rock, because that's actually what's going to happen. When we look at education, we can take the healthcare system. I worked in the health, everything I talked about over medication, the fact that let me tell you, racism and the issue of race is so embedded in this healthcare system that I tell folk, if you don't have an advocate with you when you going through this healthcare system, don't go by yourself. Please don't ever go by you, and don't send your loved ones by themselves. People must know that they have the right to ask questions, because I work with a lot of young Black women. I tell them, I say, if somebody mess up your hair doing your nails, you're going to check them. Well, when you go to the doctor, you do the same thing. You ask all the questions till you understand exactly what they're saying. But the healthcare system, in terms of how we go into a hospital. I'm old enough to remember Charity Hospital. And I remember my elder saying, I'm not going to Charity. You go in, you don't come out. Now I know Charity's best in terms of trauma, but I also know that my elders knew exactly what they were talking about because they understood very clearly that they were more likely to die when they go through that system than they were to live. I worked in the healthcare system. I saw the disparities, but we one little clinic. We gonna get you to this point, but I knew that we had to engage that whole system, not just have some little boutique clinic over here doing real good, but always address the fact that we don't have people of color, as many people of color who work, doctors that look like me, any kind of radiologists that look like me. And it's not because we're dumb. We're not given the opportunity, or we're thrown away in this education system early on. I mean, if we really wanted to do that, we need to start way early in preparing young people to know that they can be all, and they're not even exposed to what all the possibilities are in the healthcare system.
Can I
The
say,
over
Barbara,
medication.
that in
Yes.
when you talk about birth statistics,
Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah, that if a Black woman has a Black daughter, she's 58 to 35 to 58 better chance of good outcomes. But me as a white woman, this is a huge study that was done. Doesn't matter what the race of my doctor is, I still have good outcomes.
Outcomes.
Yeah.
It's even the things that we have to deal with in this healthcare system, not only as best we can monitor the system and saving the lives of our loved ones. We saw the racial disparities with COVID. It's like, but the bottom line, we knew this shit before COVID. You know what I'm saying? We knowing it. The fact that we always have to have somebody prove what we already know is happening to our communities.
Mhm.
This
And,
is
and it's real that they're afraid. If you could talk about that of the vaccine.
Oh yeah, yeah. People they don't want to take the vaccine. And let me tell you, another study was done. It was not that Black folk didn't want to take the vaccine; they were reluctant because they understood this healthcare system. That's a different. They
Right.
putting it out there. The narrative read, we ignorant. We don't want to take. No, we were reluctant in taking the vaccine because I told folk, I don't know about y'all who here on this in the chat, but I tell everybody I know take the vaccine. But I wasn't into the one shot. Now it's like, nah, give me two shots. That was before the one shot came out. It wasn't that folk, but I was reluctant, but I knew I was going to take it. But I had to make sure. And I work with a group of Xavier to say, first of all, we need to have people we know and trust. Where Dr. Ferdinand at? Where folk that I know that I trust to say, boy, it's okay. And when the sister came up with it, I go like, okay, I'm feeling a lot better about this. I'm taking this shot regardless of these shots. But it wasn't that my people were ignorant. It's
Oh,
that my people understood the history of this healthcare system. They understood that they don't matter. And I deal the Black folk. I don't speak for other people of color, but other people of color get hit sometimes the same ways. And it's like, for me, I understood the history in this country of the healthcare system and what it's done to my people. So I got the reluctance, and I understood it. I had to say I gotta go do it, but I want some folk that I know that we can talk to, that talk back to us. And I really appreciated Xavier University for doing that. Pulling folk together, having these conversations. Not that all people were privy to them, but those of us that were had a responsibility to spread the word out there. But healthcare, uh, access, being able to buy your medication, healthcare, a privilege versus a right. We can go through all these housing. What else I got up there? What's my other systems, Diane? I'm trying. Oh, I'm gonna pin you and see if I can
Social
see it bigger.
services. You want to do a little
Social services. Let me tell you something about social services. I've just recently finished the book, a colleague and I, and it's around this stuff. It goes into deep stuff, but we wrote it where folk can just pick it up and read it. It's at the editor. And doing this book, it made me realize that social services was a new form of racism. I didn't always understand that. I too have directed social service programs, and it's not an either or, because I knew my community need housing, they needed clothing, they needed food, all of that. But the more I studied and did the research, I said, my God, what happened? Social services redirected the whole movement for civil and human rights to service providers. We started struggling on getting money for our services, and we stopped struggling on building an anti-racist, anti-oppressive society. And so it's not that they're bad, but let me tell you, I tell folk, dang, social service was like racism and showed up in a new dress, a wig, and some lipstick, and I didn't know it. And when I looked at it, I couldn't get rid of the social services, but I knew that there was other stuff that I had to do as well. It wasn't enough for me to create programs, that I had to, one, inform and educate my community so that they could push the question of why I need all these daggone programs anyhow. You understand why? And keep the program so we don't think what I call is dichotomous logic. I need both and so helping us get to a place. But I just want to, I got about 5 minutes, y'all. And I'm talking fast. Now, look, most of y'all from New Orleans, so maybe y'all understand me. But when I'm traveling everywhere, people are like, you have an accent. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm from New Orleans. Like I tell people, I call people baby. I tell them, look, I'm from New Orleans. I call you baby ain't because I want you, because I'm from New Orleans, okay? When I'm doing this workshop. But social services and the fact that when you look at around this nation, Diana, what's the percentage of social service boards that are run by people called white?
uh, in the
Like,
90%. Yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, 90%. But how many of them service in communities of color? Then we got communities of color. Like I say, I don't talk about other communities. I know we got a whole bunch of black folk in this city who run in social service programs, and all they see of our community is a community in need. They don't see the potential of power. They don't see helping people get a sense of their own power. We just keep feeding them. Let's just keep feeding them. And it creates an unhealthy dependency on these programs when all you're doing is the program and you're not educating, informing, and helping people get a sense of their own power and building leadership in those communities. That's the difference. So I ain't telling people stop with your program. I'm telling make your program mean more than a program, that you don't just see the people as something needing something, but you see the people with potential and possibility to push back. Now, what I want to say about these communities ain't all communities of color. You got communities that look like this that are white communities. I'm up in Pennsylvania. White people lost their job. When I'm working in Appalachia, mines closed down. That whole meth epidemic that's going on. Same, you got white people living this same under these kind of pressures, right? But the real deal, this concept of race has divided us so much that we can't even come together and push back. We fight amongst ourselves in these little communities. We want to fight, we'll fight each other, and that's a whole nother piece, because we also have to deal with and grapple with how we've internalized these concepts of who we are as people, and that's a whole nother discussion. But the fact that we can't come together, and we said people of color, like BIPOC, like we all get along. That's black, indigenous, and people of color. It's like you got the black folk not liking the brown folk not liking, but nobody liking the Asian. We poor white folk ain't liking none of us, and we mad at them. And guess what? The folk who really holding the juice ain't liking none of us, and like to see us at each other, and helping people understand this, y'all. It's not easy, but it's necessary. And we believe we can get there to push folk to a whole nother level of understanding. This stuff was not by accident. You know what? This community you can find in every city in this country. Every city. You know what one of my colleagues, Madi, Madi said and made so much sense. He said, you know what, Barbara, this is like a franchise, you know, just like a McDonald's. It's the same everywhere. I don't care if I'm here. I don't care if I'm in Chicago, Detroit, Flint. I don't care wherever I've been. Everywhere this exists. Working on the res, same kind of thing. Because people think, oh, well, don't worry about the Indians, as they call them. They getting casino money. I wish we study a little bit more. Yeah, they got some getting it. But you know what? You still have such racial disparities. In fact, in all these systems in this country, indigenous people fare out worse than even Black people. But you know why they're not mentioned? They're not talked about? Because this racist society no longer sees them as a threat. It is Black folk that they see as a threat. So there's something called anti-Blackness. There's a peculiar and particular relationship in this country with people of African descent. George Floyd represents what this nation has always felt about Black folk. You are not a human being. And not being a human being, I can do you whatever I want, whenever I want. This nation is still grappling with recognizing the humanity of Black folk. And brown folk catching hell, y'all. And indigenous people catching more hell. But even with folk called Latinx, Hispanic, guess what? This nation has decided that some of them can be white now. They let you check off. You Hispanic, not of African descent. Like everybody, African descent. It's like, but we know what that's about. White folk need some more white folks, they go get them some. It's like even the attack on our Asian brothers and sisters, what's happening in this country. First of all, we need to realize that it ain't just started happening. It's always happening. But what we also need to realize that racism and this whole idea of race is the foundation of that. Happen that Asians are the flavor of the day. It's like whenever folk in power decide and target folk, that's where we kind of run. And we can get caught up in that too with our crazy self. Because racism has really, I see, driven this nation insane. We got to just check ourselves. That's all. Just want to ask questions. I see some head. Thank you, Patrice.
Barbara,
Lord have mercy.
Barbara, let me say one thing too.
Yes.
This is what happens when people are poor, right? But
yes,
95% of the poor people that are on services are working poor people. So the question becomes, they don't, they just keep people more comfortable. All these services keep people more comfortable in their poverty. But why does this nation not decide to end poverty? Because we want to keep all the people Barbara's talking about in that place with the not able to get out of it. Very few can get out of it today. Thank you, Barbara.
It's it's non-profit for us, Diana, but it's way profitable for a lot of people. Poverty is profitable. Okay, I'm getting some questions. I know there's a lot of stuff I put out there. Hopefully I can clear it up if you got. I see a raised hand. Who is that? Patrice, y'all help me. Is it somebody? Let me see if I can read. Poverty is, Pat. Poverty is profitable.
I don't see any raised hands at this point. If anyone would like the opportunity to speak, I can grant you access to do that. Or if you just simply want to put your comment there, feel free. Ms. Barbara, there's one to you from Tanya.
Gotcha. Can you elaborate about social service? I'm curious to hear more. And one of the things, is it Tanya? I wish I knew if I was saying
Tanya.
Oh, good. One of the things I want us to understand that the whole idea of social service programs, charity has been around, but charity initially in this country was only basically for white people. Okay, there was charity when you look after Reconstruction in the history of this nation. Charity came basically through the Black church for folk who had been liberated legally from slavery. Nonprofits. You look at the history of nonprofit 501c3. Nonprofits, but that tax code actually happened in 1954. 1954, you had Brown versus Board, where you had struggles going on, civil rights struggles. You had people with money, putting money in the freedom fight, all of that. Folk going like, you know what? We got to control who gets this money and how it's going to be spent. They come up with a tax code 501c3. Under the 501c3, it's not that you can't do anything, but you've been limited on what you can do. My question has always been, well, the government is a problem for me. You mean if I got a 501c3, I can't engage the government in the struggle around these questions? Well, if you title it public education or voter education, we are limited with these 501c3s, because if you step out of line with that 501c3 in your social service agency, you will get chopped off at the knees. Now, it's not about having, not having. If you got a 501c3, utilize some of those resources, that 501c3, to educate, inform the community that you're serving. As long as your 501c3 is solely a service provider, it's not helping to make change. So when I talk about a 501c3 in social services, they were put in a place of fighting for the civil and human rights. They were put in place because when you look at the civil rights movement, we look at the attacks of it, it would not have been chopped off. Not that it stopped, but it got shot down. And I'm talking literally shot down, because you look at the leadership, they were either in prison, exiled, or killed. That's kind of it. And then you see all of the dumping of these social service programs. They had to some kind of way manage the social unrest that was happening. You know how they manage it? They feed us some government cheese and all this stuff. They give us a little change and we run a program. And guess what? We happy. Like we ain't raising no questions. We like, okay, if I can help you find, then that's not all of them, because I know some social service programs are pushing the envelope, especially when I think of somebody like Andronika Mars. I don't know how she just came up, and this sister around housing. She ain't just being happy with, okay, you gonna give me some money. She pushing the envelope. Why are there not affordable housing in this city? See, I'm telling you about New Orleans. We get Black people in position. First of all, we expect them to be, like deliver everything. We gotta understand these folk got a position. They ain't got no power. If they act on that position out of line with those who control the economics of this city, they're gonna dismiss them. So we got to understand how the setup really is played out. Can they make a difference? Yes, they can. And they have made a difference in this city. But our expectations of them should never waver. We should expect them to push that envelope at as much as they can. But when they do, we got to be there too to protect them, because they're going to come after them.
And
Miss
Barbara,
Barbara?
I want to add,
Yes.
can I add
Go
one
ahead,
thing
Miss Diana.
first before, yeah.
I'm sorry. Diana, go ahead. I'm sorry. And
Yeah,
then somebody got to say something.
if you are in a social service agency and you feed 500 homeless people a day, you keep getting more and more funding. That's what it's That's what it's determined by how many services you give. But you're not looking at how do we end homelessness. That's what we're talking about. If you're a social service agency and you're training people for jobs, you're training people most of the time for minimum wage jobs, which means that you'll still be poor. Why not fight for a livable wage for everybody? So that's what we're saying. They do the thing that gives them the money, and
Yes.
the rich that are in the foundation don't want them to push for a $15 or $16
Right.
wage because they won't make as much money. Or if you end homelessness. So that's what we're saying about them. They need to look bigger, as Barbara's been saying. They need to look at all of the things that are impacting their life. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
finished,
That's
Patricia.
Yeah,
okay.
somebody had a question of how is poverty profitable?
Yeah.
Yeah, folk who service those who are poor make money. Whether it's, when you think about, I even think about, let's just take food stamps. Who really making this money off of food stamps? The grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like somebody's profiting off of people being poor. Whether it's, look, I profit off of people being poor when I ran the clinic. I had a job. We all in some way profit. I had a job because there were a lot of poor people in St. Thomas. We needed a clinic. We got a clinic. So when you, well, let me tell you, when you working in a nonprofit and you servicing poor people, you profiting off poor people, even though you may not get paid a decent wage yourself. You're getting paid a wage. Poverty is profitable. We think because foundations give money, foundations make so much money, they don't even feel that pittance that they give to have a program in community. They ain't getting rid of their endowment. They basically giving you the interest off the endowment. So the robber barons' children still have all of the money. They have a foundation. We look at foundations and how that money is spent. So when I look at Kellogg, it's great, Kellogg. You sitting there, you get your scholar, but you ain't did jack to end poverty in this country. None of them foundations have, and they know that. I used to be invited to them. I'm not any longer.
Barbara, it's also We Cash Checks. It's also the drugstores. It's also
Everybody.
the
Thank you.
dialysis, the lawyers and the DNA testing, the corner store, the fast food.
Yes.
All of them make money.
I'm making money. Thank you, Diana. Absolutely.
Jenny mentioned, remember when working at a nonprofit meant making peanuts?
Remember, yeah.
Making peanuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let me tell you, and when those folk who are making those peanuts did more to impact the reality of these communities and some of these folk who making these grand theft nonprofit salaries. I'm just saying. Now, do I not want people to make money? No, I think folk deserve to make money. But if you just making money and you ain't helping making this change, I don't care about you making no money. And I can love you. That don't mean I don't love you, but I'm gonna call you out. It's like we've got to understand why these programs were created to keep people pacified and satisfied. They were not created to end poverty, and they were not created to build the capacity of the people that live in these communities to question these systems.
And Tanya asked a question. She said, how can we still provide people with what they need now, like food and housing, while pushing for change? Good question.
That's a very good question. I can tell you in terms of when you have, like I said, when you have a program, let's just say you have a feeding program. Well, I'll deal with my experience of working at a clinic. Like I had to make sure that folks had access to their medicine, that people would get in and treat it right because they come to the clinic, they were sick. But I also found a way that I could funnel resources for that community to meet. I brought in this information to that community. They built their capacity to a point they started holding me accountable. Well, Barbara, no, they can't come in here with no drug trials. I hear you. This is our community. I could not just provide the service of the clinic without understanding that that clinic had to be the centerpiece for that community to be organized. And when I say organized, I'm talking about educated, informed, and providing technical assistance for them. To a point when they got to, I go like, I gotta leave. This is who y'all should hire. You know what they told me? We love you, Barbara. You know that. But you ain't gonna tell us who we should hire. I said, you know what? I could get all mad. Well, I did my job and I did it well because the community, that leadership in that community made that decision. So we don't have the option of an either or. We gotta build the capacity of the community. That's what we have to do. And you don't stop. If you serving people, there got to be some folk that's coming. If you got a soup kitchen, hell, got to be some folk coming to that soup kitchen you can have a meeting with an extra soup and sandwich where you can start informing people and listening to people and hearing. Because folk have brains, they're smart, but we don't create a space for them to be heard. So whatever you're doing, create a space. And I'm not going to tell you it happened overnight, because they don't trust you. You're a program. You program like every other program. So it's like, it ain't like, oh yeah, we just gonna trust Barbara, Miss Major, whatever. When I became Auntie, Miss B, the trust was solid, okay? But that still take time to build that relationship. Then I can educate and I can inform. And the community go like, yeah, and how about this? I'm like, y'all smarter than me. We got to believe and know that there's wisdom in these communities that can lead us. We always think we're the ones that are supposed to be the leader. they can lead us out of some of this mess.
And
As
That
Barbara Jenny mentioned, it meant working for the love of the mission.
right.
And
yes, indeed.
yes, and then Priyanka
Yeah.
says, don't price gouge.
Yep, they do that too.
Yes, yes, yes.
But let me just take another example. So the education system, they've got parents that are working 2 to 3 jobs. Why aren't we fighting from the education system or embracing those fighting for a livable wage? Why don't, free aftercare or free tutoring? Parents are in prison, fight for equity in the police and policing and sentencing in this country. Kids not safe walking home from school. What can you do about that? So every institution that we're talking about here needs to be in collaboration with other ones. Not one
Yes.
institution can change it, but build a collaboration and see how you can help change the conditions that they're in.
And we're not saying you can do everything, but you can do something. Sometimes you got to claim, those of us who do this work, who care, got to claim our voices as well. Sometimes it might be a letter to an editor, a phone call to your representative or council person. They need to know we out there. I'm trying to remember who it was who said, if you're silence in your pain, you will die and they will say you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Mhm.
We can't be silent. It's like, and our voices count, because a lot of times when we're in these positions and these jobs, we don't value our voice either. Our voices are really, really important, y'all. And it could be, you never know the impact you will have talking to other people, listening to other people, join an organization, people, we spend time denouncing organizations. They ain't doing nothing. They ain't doing, well, maybe they ain't doing nothing because you ain't there. Just
Right.
saying, just think about it.
And also, Barbara, let me do another example is Child Protective Services. In one
Oh,
state, Texas, they got together in every one of the regions in every community, and Child Protective Services built relationships with the community, with the churches, and with the universities. And what that meant was that people would recognize when somebody was in trouble before CPS came in, and then they could start doing something about it. So the mother leaves to go do her laundry at the laundromat, and so she leaves them on loan, and one of the kids get hurt, they take her children away. But the church notices it, the community notices it, and the universities are working to keep the numbers in check and helping them also. So everybody needs a relationship with this community to do better work, by listening to them and believing them. Right, Barbara?
yes, that's the believing. I was reading something talking about chronic compassion, that people in this community, people get tired of folk in this community because it's like they're requiring chronic compassion. And it's almost like this, an example, it was like, if your house burned down one time, I got compassion for you. If another house burned down, it's like, nah, I ain't dealt with you already, blah, blah, blah. That we've got to continue to listen and understand this stuff like domino. It has like the domino effect. Ain't one thing. Because when you think about families that live in these communities, it's not one of these systems they face
It's right.
every day. They don't get to pick one system. I'm just gonna deal with education today. No, they dealing with all of this stuff. And not that the folk in here understand that they did all they feeling stuff. And all they know is like, I'm tired and I'm angry. Not realizing this is what folk are angry about. But let me tell you, but the rage that we see come out in these communities had to do with proximity. It's like I'm picked off at all of this, and I'm just the person next to me. I'm gonna deal with them, and it's somebody in that community. Because as long as it stays in that community, it's all right. But
That's
you
right.
let the spillage of that come out, and it's a whole different kind of attitude.
And Barbara, I remember the compassion fatigue
Yes.
after Katrina. We all should remember that when they started saying, we're tired of listening to it, just don't rebuild it. Don't rebuild New Orleans. And remember all those things that were said?
Let me tell you, I sat with the president of the United States in the White House of the United States, George Bush. I sat next to that man and he told me, well, you know, Madam Chair, people are Katrina fatigued.
Right.
Now, let me tell you, I had to pray before I go up in there and guide my tongue. You understand? Because it wasn't there. I wasn't there for me. I was there for my city. And I had to say to him, do they not understand what has happened to us, to my city? We are the ones who are fatigued and tired. That means if they have no clue, it's not about just things that we lost. It's our lifestyle. It's our way of life. Folk didn't understand about they Katrina fatigue. You know, as crazy as I can be, I realized that it wasn't for me to go off on him. Look, man, I need to get something for my city here. But you got to understand something. My people are suffering. So it's like, I ain't going back and forth with you. I like Snoop Dogg. I ain't going back and forth with you. But you need to understand, folk are tired. We're the ones that are fatigued. He telling me about Katrina fatigue. They came up with all kind of new language at the time, though. But I got some more minutes. Anybody else? And you don't have to ask a question. You can say something. You can say, this sound like crap, whatever. It don't matter. Y'all can say anything in the chat.
Right. But it's definitely what it did for me is that if I'm in my services, I'm looking at the world through this little teeny tiny view of my services. What this did for me is I had to stand back and get a wide angle view of everything that's going on in their lives, everything
Yes.
that's happening. And white people are in here too, as she said, and black people, brown people, everybody's in here. But race will tell us it's different. You might
Yes.
you have a better chance of getting out of that situation if you're white. But we have to look at what's hitting all of them, because I've worked in Appalachia. I've seen dire poverty with white people. They all need help, but they don't need just programs. They need the ability to speak for themselves. We call it a power analysis, but when you're dealing with all of those and they're not working for you, it becomes a disempowering analysis. So the people in here are feeling disempowered. And that's what we have to do by being in relationship with them and having them help us make decisions on everything we do. They become empowered, and you won't believe the amount of solutions that will come out of that.
The other thing is that we've been socialized to focus on the violence inside of these communities.
Good point.
We have not been socialized to look at all this coming at this community. This is violence.
Violence.
We got to deal with all this all the time. Folk worry about like black on black crime. They got white on white crime. We focusing in on that. And I'm not saying we don't need to deal with it, but we got to understand that all this outside of here has implications for everything that goes on inside of here. So we got to focus on both, not one. We got to focus on both. It's like, and there ain't no quick solution, y'all. It's like, we want to fix it. There ain't no quick solution to this. Like Diana said, we didn't create it, but we got to figure, we can figure it out. There's enough genius of us people who want to make a difference that if we can come together, leave the egos outside, take leadership from the folk that's most impact, that we can turn this thing around. And in reality, like I said, this exists in every city. If you living in rural, see, another foot is transportation. I think about folk in rural Louisiana can't even get to a place of service. In these communities, there's one thing is retail. Folk don't have access to food. Because I love the idea, is like they call them food deserts. Now they're saying it's food apartheid, that people can't even go, and having transportation even get to where you can get fresh fruits and vegetables that's affordable. All of this folk are dealing with every day. And some of us on here may be dealing with this as well. And it's like how you withstand this. You know, it's like we don't give people credit for the strength it takes to
That's
survive
right.
this.
That's right.
See, I know how strong I am. I don't care, like they say, bring your best and I'm gonna deal with you. Because if I can survive this, that's what a survivor is. And helping people in this community understand you're not just a victim, you're a survivor of this. And when you look around this nation, the moral leadership of this nation comes from this. You don't come outside out here. It's up in here. But we've got to one connect to the folk in there. We've got to bring them the information that we have, but we got to be willing to listen to the wisdom that they have as well. Did I see Patrice, you helping me in the chat? Anybody? I hope I got it all. I don't know if I get it. Oh, okay. Pat. How can we still provide people? I got that, browse guys. I think I got everybody. Oh, I'm at work. Oh yeah, I got that one. Did I miss somebody?
I
Just
don't
let me know.
see anything or anyone that's in.
Anybody still here?
Yes, Miss Barbara.
Y'all
Yes,
still
ma'am.
out there? I can't see y'all. Still be there, folk.
Yeah, and you know, we all have to just think about why you get certain behaviors in certain neighborhoods, and it's because
Yes.
this is I could not live for a week on what some of these people with kids survive in a month. They are strong and they have ideas, but we keep dictating to them, and we have to stop that.
Not only dictating, we want to police the money they get. Or they gonna get
Right.
all that money from, well, what's the stimulus check with all them children. It's like, y'all ain't nobody policing them corporations who got gazillions of dollars. I'm going like, we focus on that. But see, we got to be conscious that we've been socialized too, y'all, to see this stuff this way. And it's not easy. It's like, got to catch yourself sometimes. Oh, let me not go there. Let me think a little broader. Let me go a little deeper. But it's like, we like to police the lives and the resources of folk that live in communities like this. And it's like, I ain't gonna tell you, we've just been socialized to do it. We've been trained. We don't realize it consciously and subconsciously. We've sucked in a lot of this understanding of what things are and why they are the way that they are. So
And
none of us are clean of this stuff, y'all.
Barbara, if we asked you why are people poor, you would come up with a list that would be so long. Then you really begin to understand why people are in there. I read the other day that if I made $1 million
Yeah.
a year, that it would take 100 years for me to get $1 billion, 100 years of working. Think about, we are not taxing the rich anymore. I pay more taxes than the biggest corporations. I don't make
You
that
pay
much.
more taxes than the ex-president of the United States. I'm
Right.
just saying.
So that's what we're
It's
saying.
like, Jesus,
We're
like,
saying there are
dude.
many ways that we can look at how do we end poverty, which is really going to help us when we look at race and racism.
Yes.
Yes.
Any But I ain't just holding y'all.
No, we have some comments. People were
Oh, good.
responding
Oh,
to
thank
you.
you, Patrice.
Yes,
Oh,
they're
look, they
indicating
said
they're
here.
still
Oh, yeah, my
here.
folk are here. Thank
Yes,
y'all. Y'all
I'm
didn't leave
here.
us.
Yes, I'm here.
I
Jenny
love it.
says
They
there's
said we
this has been
here.
a lot. Go
Thank
ahead, Ms.
y'all.
Walker. Go ahead.
No, I just want topics that hit close to home is education. I hear you. Me too.
Yes.
And what I see happening to our babies. See, one of the things, Tanya, for me is we can talk about all, like they show you these statistics. There's no real monitoring in education. It's like when I think of how this system is set up, I want somebody to show me the data, and I don't trust everybody giving me data of the children that graduate from our high schools, even those that go to college. How many of them finish? See, I got I got some suspicions about that, of what's really happening to these children in the schools. And that's not to say we don't have some good schools. I'm not going down that road. I'm talking about this entire system. It's we losing our babies. One see it in one way or another. It's just questions. It's like, who monitors? Like when I look, like I track my babies, they leave Moton. We go to 8th grade, but there ain't nothing to show me that when little Johnny leave my school, that he even go to high school. Who's keeping?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary. And then they say we had 100% graduation. Yeah, but when I look at your real information, folk, you had 300 kids come in. You had 100% graduation because you ain't had but 120 in that senior class. What happened to them children?
Right.
Just
Right.
questions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh Lord.
And that's just what we want you to do, to really start questioning, because
Yeah.
children will have questions about why did that neighborhood look that way. You know, when white folks, like were the only ones in St. Thomas housing project in the beginning, there was a lot of money that went into there that they could get out of there. And then-
Yeah, FHA made them loans.
right.
That was part of that $120 billion of FHA loans down. And you look at the time period that white folk can move out of St. Thomas housing project, that 120 billion, 98% of it went to people called white.
And
But when
houses did
black,
not cost that much money back then.
that's exactly right. Well, yeah,
So
they- okay.
then when it becomes
Don't get
flat,
back to only getting the money if your numbers, I'm sorry. Goes back to only getting the money if your numbers look good, not judged on really
really, yep,
working.
yep.
That's exactly right, Jane. Thank you. Thank you. Because they get to set the standards and what they're gonna measure you by. You know, that's a lack of accountability. Yes, in charter schools. Yes. Oh,
Mhm.
y'all so good. Next time, y'all need to do this piece.
And-
No, I'm serious. See, I know we got folk out there who are thinking and trying to figure this stuff out. Y'all
You
give me
guys have
hope,
a-
folks.
Sorry, Ms. Barbara, you have approximately 2 minutes. Do you want to wrap up in any way for tonight?
Yeah, I
Invite
do,
them back
Patrice,
next
because
week?
I want you to let folk know you're giving the resources, and next week we invite everybody back. It's on you, Patrice. Bring your gorgeous face back here.
And they can listen to this, right, Patrice? They can get the first one if they missed it online, or
Patrice, tell them how to access it when you come back on. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, absolutely. We've recorded the first and we're recording this one as well. So if you want to repeat or see it again, we will make that available. Next week, our final week, we will provide a list of resources, both from Ms. Diana and Ms. Barbara, sharing additional information on books that they recommend you read and resources that could be of benefit not only to you, but to you and your children as well. So if you guys don't have anything further, we would like to thank you, the Parenting Center, as well as the People's Institute, Ms. Barbara and Ms. Diana, for spending another hour and a half with us tonight. This has been enjoyable, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place, same platform, for just a little bit more information. At this time, we bid you an excellent night and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Love to the love and hugs. Bye, y'all.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
all. Thank you all. Thank
Oh,
you all.
thank you. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah.
That
All right,
is.
so we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye,
Okay.
Patrice.
See you later. Ms.
Take a
Barbara,
break.
Diana.
Get some rest.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Love you, love
Love
Patrice.
you.
Bye,
Love you.
y'all.